We grow up with a comforting story. Society is our shelter, the laws, the schools, the jobs, the manners, everything designed so that we can live civilized lives. We are told this is progress. We are told this is safety. We are told this is what makes life worth living. But two voices from the past look deeper. Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that society is not a gift. It is a trade. We give away the raw freedom we once had. And in return we receive rules, comparisons, envy and inequality, what we call civilization. He warned may actually be chains disguised as order. And then Sigmund Freud pushed the critique further. To maintain that order, society demands repression. You must choke down your instincts, your desires, the wild pulse that makes you human. In exchange you receive stability. But stability that is purchased with silence. The silence of joy, the silence of passion. The silence of your most authentic impulses. So society does not only protect you, it manages you. It buys peace by selling you a golden cage. And if you have ever felt that vague emptiness in the middle of your routine, that quiet sense that something vital is missing, perhaps it is not your weakness. Perhaps it is the invisible cost that society has already taken from you. Rousseau begins with a thought experiment. Imagine the human being before society. Not in a city, not under a king, not in a marketplace in his eyes. The natural human was simple. Needs were few: a meal, a place to rest, the bond of family or companionship. Without property to divide us, without titles to compete over. There was little reason for envy. Life was fragile, but it was free. Then came the turning point. Someone, somewhere, put a fence around a piece of land and said the fateful words, "This is mine." Rousseau calls this the true birth of society. From that moment a cascade began. Property created comparison. Comparison created jealousy. Jealousy demanded protection. And protection gave birth to laws, rules, and entire structures to defend what one person could now claim against another on the surface. This looked like progress. Crops were grown, homes were built, communities expanded, but beneath the surface, freedom was being traded away piece by piece. Rousseau argued that this was the origin of artificial inequality, not the natural differences of strength or talent, of the constructed hierarchies of wealth and prestige. The social order was no longer about survival. It became a theater of appearances. Who owns more, who dresses finer, who holds authority, and once this theater is in motion, every participant is pulled into the play. The rules of society do not force you with visible chains. They seduce you with standards. You learn to measure yourself against your neighbor. You learn to chase recognition, to crave respect, to fear being left behind. It feels voluntary, but it is a game, rigged by the first declaration of ownership. Rousseau's warning is sharp. What we call civilization is a system of comparison that enslaves us without bars. We call it dignity, but it is envy. We call it ambition, but it is dependence. You can no longer simply be. You must perform, you must prove. You must live under the silent contract that says, play by the rules of property and status, or be dismissed as nothing. Think about the ordinary life of today. A family buys a house in the right neighborhood, not just for shelter, but for reputation. Parents work overtime not just to provide, but to keep up appearances. Children grow under the shadow of grades, colleges, and careers that signal success. Behind every choice lies the same old comparison. Who is ahead, who is behind? Who is respected, who is invisible? The fence is still there, we just no longer see it. Rousseau does not deny that society creates order. He does not even deny that order has its uses. But he forces us to ask, what did we lose in the bargain? We lost a freedom. That was not about doing anything we want, but about not having to constantly measure ourselves against others. We lost the natural dignity of simply existing. And so the paradox emerges. Civilization raises us above nature, but it does so by chaining us to illusions. You are free as long as you obey. You are equal as long as you accept inequality. This is Rousseau's dark truth. Society is not only a home. It is a hierarchy, and once you see this, you begin to notice another cost. The way society does not only chain your choices, but also chains your very desires. That is where Freud enters the story. If Rousseau revealed how society binds us, through comparison and property, Freud uncovers the hidden cost inside the human psyche. His focus was not on the marketplace or the law, but on the inner life of each individual. He saw that the price of civilization is not only inequality, it is repression. Freud believed that human beings are born with powerful drives. We crave pleasure, intimacy, release. We carry impulses of desire and aggression that come from the very core of our biology. Left unchecked, these drives could tear communities apart. So society steps in with rules, prohibitions, and moral codes. We call them manners, we call them laws. We call them norms, but at their heart, they are acts of suppression. They tell us what not to feel, what not to express, what not to pursue. In his book Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud makes the case with clarity. Every ounce of order you enjoy is purchased by the inhibition of your instincts. Society cannot survive if you act on every desire, so it teaches you to hold back. It punishes you for breaking boundaries. It rewards you for discipline and self-denial. And slowly you learn to swallow your impulses, until you forget that they were ever there. But repression does not vanish. It transforms. The energy of forbidden desires must go somewhere. Sometimes it leaks out as anxiety, guilt, or depression. Sometimes it redirects into compulsive work, endless consumption, or hidden vices. Freud saw this as the true wound of modern life. We are promised stability, but the cost is an undercurrent of misery. The more rules a society builds, the more dissatisfaction it must also generate. Think of the man who spends decades climbing the corporate ladder. He learns to control his temper, his frustrations, his longings. Outwardly, he appears successful. Inwardly, he carries a quiet resentment, an emptiness that no promotion can erase. Or consider the family. That plays the role of perfect respectability. They smile at the dinner table, attend every function, maintain the image. But beneath the surface, desires are silenced. Passions are buried and the unspoken tension builds, until it emerges in conflict or illness. This is not weakness. This is the structural price of belonging. Freud was not naive. He knew civilization required sacrifice. Without rules, there would be chaos. But his warning was precise. When you silence too much of human instinct, you do not create peace. You create discontent disguised as order. You create the very malaise that fills the modern world. With quiet suffering, the genius of Freud's perspective is that it shows us the invisible bars of the golden cage Rousseau told us. That society takes freedom by creating inequality. Freud shows us that society takes joy by repressing desire. Both are true, and together they reveal the darkest truth of all. Society does not simply organize us. It reshapes us. It tells us not only how to act, but how to feel. It manages not only our behavior, but our inner life. This is why so many people, even in safe and prosperous societies, wake up with a vague sense of emptiness. They are protected, yes. They are civilized, yes. But they are also quietly suffocating under the weight of repressed instincts. The cost of order is the slow erosion of authenticity. and that cost is still rising. Rousseau's insight can be broken down. Like a chain reaction, first comes ownership. Someone claims a piece of land, a tool, a house. At that moment, the world is no longer neutral. A difference appears. You have more. I have less. That difference triggers comparison. I look at what you own and measure myself against it. My sense of worth is no longer tied to survival or inner strength. It is tied to what others can see. Jealousy and rivalry begin to grow. Where there was once only need, comparison then demands protection. If you have more than me, you fear losing it. If I have less, I want to take it. To keep the peace, society creates rules, contracts, and rituals on the surface. These rules protect us, but at a deeper level. They protect inequality. They ensure that the first claim of ownership remains valid even if generations have passed. Finally, rules solidify into conventions. We begin to accept them as natural. We forget that they are artificial. We no longer see the chains as chains. We see them as standards of wealth, standards of behavior, standards of status. And once those standards are in place, we adjust ourselves to meet them. We shape our identities not from within, but from comparison with others. This is Rousseau's mechanism. Ownership creates comparison. Comparison creates rules. Rules create chains. You may not feel the shackles on your wrists, but you feel the pressure to conform, to perform, to be seen as worthy. That is how society transforms free beings into actors on a stage. And while Rousseau shows us the external chains, Freud will show us how the same process takes place. Inside the mind, Freud's mechanism is different, but just as merciless. Where Rousseau spoke of chains, we can see Freud spoke of chains inside the mind. The first step is repression. Every society demands that we hold back our instincts, desires for pleasure, impulses of anger, cravings for freedom. They cannot all be expressed, so we learn to suppress them. We bury them beneath layers of manners, laws, and self-control. But repression does not erase desire. It mutates energy that could have been lived directly. Is forced underground. There it becomes discontent. The person feels restless, anxious, guilty. They may not even know why. It is the invisible tension of living against one's own instincts. Civilization is orderly on the outside, but turbulent within. That tension seeks release. It transforms into new outlets. Some throw themselves into work, chasing success as a socially acceptable way to channel ambition. Others consume endlessly, buying, scrolling, distracting themselves from the silence of their own repressed drives. Still others turn to hidden vices, addictions, or eruptions of violence. Freud saw all of this as a circuit. Repression leads to discontent. Discontent transforms into symptoms, and symptoms become the hidden price of civilization. Society manages these symptoms with entertainment, consumption, and distraction. But these are only temporary valves, not cures. The instinct remains, pressing against the walls we build. Freud called this the discontent of civilization. The more rules we invent, the more suffering we create. So Rousseau showed us how external standards bind us. Freud shows us how internal repression breaks us. Together, they describe a machine that not only rules our actions, but reshapes our desires. And in the modern world, this machine has been perfected. If Rousseau and Freud uncovered the blueprints, the modern world has built the full machine. The forces they described have not disappeared. They have been weaponized. Advertising and media magnify Rousseau's cycle of comparison. Where once you compared yourself to your neighbor, now you compare yourself to the entire world. Social platforms turn every success, every purchase, every curated image into a silent command. Measure up. It lives in your pocket, glowing at you from a screen. At the same time, the economy has become Freud's pressure valve. Endless consumption, instant entertainment. The culture of upgrades, these are not luxuries. They are tools to manage repressed instincts. When desire cannot be expressed directly, society sells you substitutes. A new gadget, a streaming binge, a vacation you cannot afford. Each is a temporary release, a way to quiet the instinct without ever satisfying it. Institutions reinforce this pattern. Schools reward conformity. Companies reward obedience. States regulate behavior under the banner of security. You are taught not just how to work, but how to want. Desire itself becomes standardized, molded into forms that keep the system running. Rousseau warned that society chains us with conventions. Freud warned it suffocates us with repression. Modernity has learned how to use both at scale. The result is not just order, it is control, and when the weight of that control spreads across millions, the consequences reach far beyond the individual. They reshape the entire fabric of society. When these mechanisms scale across an entire population, the consequences are not hidden in the mind of one person. They spread through the whole structure of society. The first is anime Durkheim. Used the word to describe the state of normlessness. When traditional bonds and shared standards collapse, in a world of infinite comparison and constant consumption, there is no longer a common measure of meaning. One person chases wealth, another fame, another distraction. No single thread ties them together. The result is a quiet drift, a sense that people live in the same place but not in the same world. The second consequence is inequality. Rousseau already warned that property divides us. In the modern age, those divisions grow sharper. Wealth concentrates, and with it comes power. Those who have more build walls, both literal and symbolic. To keep others out, trust between groups erodes. Resentment builds, and the promise of society as a common home begins to fracture into a contest of survival. The third consequence is the erosion of community. Where once people relied on neighbors, kin, or guilds, they now rely on institutions and markets. Connection becomes transactional. Relationships are measured by utility, not by loyalty. Community becomes audience. Bonds thin until they break. This is the paradox. The more civilized we become, the less we feel connected. The more society grows in complexity, the more individuals feel isolated, and that isolation does not stay abstract. It reaches into the private life of each person, shaping their nights, their choices, their very sense of self. The collapse of community is not just a social fact. It is an intimate wound. It reaches into the life of each individual, shaping how they feel when they wake up in the morning and how they sleep at night. The first wound is alienation. People sense a distance between who they are and who they must pretend to be at work. At home, even among friends, they feel like actors reading from a script. The self becomes a performance designed to meet expectations, not an expression of inner truth. Over time, this gap creates a quiet despair. You can succeed, you can own, you can impress, and still feel like a stranger inside your own skin. The second wound is insomnia. When the day ends and silence arrives, the mind continues its restless work. Thoughts circle around comparisons, failures, desires that were never expressed. The body lies still, but the repressed energy does not. It whispers in the form of anxiety, guilt, or a sense that something essential is missing. The third wound is the loss of authenticity. When every instinct is filtered through rules, standards, and appearances, what remains of the true self? You become a role, a brand, a version of yourself designed for display. Life turns into a performance, and the audience is society itself. This is the cost at the level of the individual. And to see it more clearly, we can turn to real stories that mirror these patterns in everyday life. To see these dynamics more clearly, imagine 3 lives. They are not fictional in the sense of invention. They are fictional in the sense of being distilled from patterns you can find everywhere around you. The first is the suburban parent. A family buys a house in a so-called good neighborhood. They take on a mortgage, extra work, hours, and endless responsibilities to keep their children competitive. They join school committees, purchase extracurricular programs, and measure their success against the family next door. On the surface, it looks safe and prosperous, but beneath that surface, every decision is shaped by comparison. Anxiety grows in proportion to the pressure to maintain status. Rousseau's warning comes alive here. The fence that protects property becomes the chain that limits freedom. What began as security becomes servitude to convention. The second is the corporate professional, a manager who has spent decades climbing the ladder. They have learned to suppress every impulse that does not fit the role. Personal desires are traded for late nights. At the office, intimacy and rest are sacrificed for reputation. To cope, they seek release in consumption, alcohol or expensive escapes. Each attempt at relief is temporary. The pressure always returns. Froid's circuit is visible here. Repression leads to discontent. Discontent transforms into symptoms. The individual functions but feels hollow. The third is the activist. A young person who rebels against the system. They march, speak, and fight to break the chains of convention. For a time they feel alive, but soon the system absorbs their passion. Their cause becomes a brand. Their identity becomes content, sponsors, followers, and media attention. Transform rebellion into another commodity. What began as resistance ends as burnout. This is the fusion of Rousseau and Freud. External rules bind, internal repression exhausts, and even dissent is recycled into the very machine it sought to fight. 3 lives, 3 mirrors. And together they reveal the darkest truth. Society does not merely organize us. It consumes us, repackaging even our struggles into its endless machinery. At the darkest core, society reveals itself not as a home, but as a machine. It does not simply regulate. It adapts, absorbs, and recycles. Any spark that might threaten its order is quickly converted into fuel. An artist who challenges convention becomes a marketable figure, their rebellion sold back as fashion. A protest movement is televised, branded, and turned into content. For those watching from the safety of their homes, even philosophies of freedom are condensed into slogans, printed on t-shirts and worn like a costume. This is how the machine survives. It does not destroy resistance outright. It digests it. It processes every form of dissent, strips it of danger, and releases it back into circulation as a safe commodity. And in this transformation, the original passion is drained. Individuals burn out, causes lose their fire. Authenticity is hollowed out and replaced with performance. The machine does not need the real you. It only needs the function you serve. If you do not fit, it reshapes you. If you refuse, it swallows you. This is the darkest truth. Society protects itself first, even if it means consuming the very people who built it. If society is a machine, how do you know where its gears are, grinding against your own life? The first step is to examine, honestly and without defense. Here is a checklist. Take a pen or open a note on your phone and answer these 5 questions. Do I find myself comparing my life to someone else's, whether on the street or online? What is my greatest fear of loss? Is it time, money, or status? How often do I hide my real feelings because they do not match what society expects? How many times this week did I buy something, not out of need but to feel included? If society stopped recognizing me tomorrow, who would I still be? Answer them without judgment. Write what comes to mind even if it feels uncomfortable. In 10 minutes you will see patterns. You will see where comparison chains you, where repression silences you, and where conventions quietly dictate your choices. This is not about scoring yourself. It is about recognition. Awareness is the first crack in the machine. Stop here if you need to take the test. And when you return, we will look at how to push further. Not in theory, but in practice. Awareness is only the beginning. To reclaim a measure of freedom, you need a process, not a philosophy to admire, but a practice to test. Consider this: a 30-day society detox, 4 weeks. Each with its own focus. Each with actions you can measure. Week 1 is audit and reality check. For 7 days, record every purchase and every choice. Ask yourself whether it came from need or from the urge to belong. Write down 3 times you caught yourself comparing with others at the end of the week. Count them, the number is a mirror. Week 2 is reclaiming desire. Each day, do one act that channels your instinct directly, without disguise, without consumer packaging. Write freely for 10 minutes. Move your body until it tires. Have an honest conversation with someone you trust. Track how your anxiety rises or falls. And note the moments of joy that surface. Replace 1 hour of scrolling with half an hour of creating. Week 3 is the social contract audit. List 5 rules you follow without knowing why. Then choose 2 and experiment with breaking them in harmless ways. Skip the weekend shopping trip. Speak an unpopular but honest thought. Measure your reaction. Was it fear? Was it release? Each break reveals how deep the chains run. Week 4 is reinvest in authenticity. Use the time and money you have saved to take 3 actions. Meet someone face to face who matters to you. Learn 1 practical skill and join 1 community activity. That has nothing to do with your brand or your status. Count the hours reclaimed. Count the actions completed. Count the sense of fulfillment. Keep a daily journal, 10 minutes each night. Write: today I bought because today I told the truth. Today I felt at the end of 30 days. You will have evidence, not theory, not slogans. Evidence of what changes when you loosen society's grip and choose authenticity over convention. Rousseau warned that society steals our natural freedom and replaces it with conventions. Freud warned that civilization silences our instincts and calls that silence virtue. 2 perspectives, 2 centuries apart, but both point to the same truth. Society protects us, but it also confines us. It builds a home, but it locks the door from the inside. The point is not to escape society. You cannot. The point is to see it clearly. To recognize when it serves you and when it uses you. Once you see, you can choose. You can refuse the comparisons that bind you. You can release desires in honest, healthy ways instead of buying substitutes. You can step outside the machine, if only for a moment, and remember what it feels like to be whole. Start small, take the checklist. Try the 30-day program. Watch the patterns emerge and share your story. Write it down, tell it in the comments. If you are willing, mark your journey with a single word. Society. I will read them. And some of those stories will become the ground for future work. Unfiltered and real, the machine will always exist. But its power over you depends on how deeply you sleep. Inside it, awareness is the first act of freedom. The rest is what you do with it.